For centuries, the difference between a criminal at sea and a national hero depended on a thin piece of paper. The same ships, the same cannons, the same violence. But if you had the right document, you were a pirate fighting for your country. Otherwise, a bandit destined for the gallows. Did the ocean care? Not at all. In fact, piracy wasn't the collapse of the system. On the contrary, it was the system itself. Digging a little deeper, it becomes impossible not to see this. Consider this. For much of history, states didn't seriously try to prevent piracy. In fact, they often allowed it, financed it, and shared in its profits. And when politics changed, they turned their backs. I think the most striking thing is the exportation of violence and its disguising as patriotism. Welcome to that dirty equation where money and power intersect. We need to get to the heart of the matter. Why did piracy grow so large? The answer lies in the predicament of early modern empires. The 16th and 17th centuries were a period of global trade boom. Silver, spices, sugar, everything crossed the oceans, and profits skyrocketed. But so did the risks. No state, no matter how powerful, had the resources to protect every ship. Navies were expensive, and wars were frequent. And so they found a practical solution: privatizing violence. With documents they called signal letters, they authorized private ships to plunder enemy vessels. The process was the same: attack, seize, plunder. The only difference was the authorization. Profits were divided among the crew, investors, and the state. The state didn't pay salaries or cover losses. It simply took its share. In my opinion, this was one of the oldest models of risk privatization, profit socialization in history. Interestingly, in this system, the biggest winners were never at the forefront. Sailors lived with the risk of disease, shipwreck, and execution, while investors distributed their risks and waited for profits from their comfortable positions. For example, when Sir Francis Drake plundered Spanish ships and brought immense wealth to England, Queen Elizabeth I silently participated in the plunder. But the same Drake, in a different political climate, might have been speaking his last words before an executioner. Over time, this system created its own monster. Some pirates began to think, the risk is ours, the lives are ours, the struggle is ours. So why should we share the profits with a distant king? They decided to play the game the state had taught them, this time without the state. They no longer waited for permits. They ignored the rules. They attacked every flag. And that's when the alarm bells started ringing for states. What's surprising is this: these lawless pirates were sometimes more democratically organized than the states that hunted them. They elected their captains, divided the spoils fairly, and paid compensation to the wounded. This doesn't make them good, of course, but it shows how efficient their system was. And efficiency, when it gets out of control, is the greatest threat to power. Indeed, states began to ruthlessly hunt down the pirates they had once embraced. Gallows were erected, patrols increased. Why? Because piracy had become not useful, but competitive. And the thing states destroy fastest is not immorality, but competition. But has this model truly disappeared? I don't think so. It has only changed its guise. Look at private military companies, firms extracting resources across borders, state-sponsored financial manipulations today. The same logic. Privatize the risk, collect the profit, deny responsibility. The uniforms have changed, the ships have disappeared, but the incentives remain exactly the same. My final thought is this: history shows us how flexible the concept of legality is for those who hold power. The line between crime and heroism is often drawn according to a map of self-interest. Piracy teaches us a disturbing truth. What we call order is often built on controlled chaos. And the moment this chaos begins to threaten the system, it is declared an enemy overnight. The oceans may be quieter now, but the game hasn't changed. Only the actors on the stage. You know what's wild? For centuries, the only thing separating a naval hero from a condemned pirate was a single piece of paper. The same ships, the same cannons, the same violence. The only variable was whether a government decided to stamp its approval on it. With the right document, you were a privateer, a patriot. Without it, you were a criminal headed for the gallows. History would remember one as a defender, the other as a thief. The ocean, of course, didn't care. This wasn't the system breaking down. It was the system working, just outsourced. And the deeper you look, the harder it is to see it any other way. Because for huge stretches of history, governments didn't really fight piracy. They permitted it, funded it, profited from it, and only denounced it when the political winds changed. Nothing explains law and order quite like outsourcing violence and calling it patriotism. Welcome to the messy crossroads of money, power, and history. And nothing is ever as simple as it seems. To understand why piracy became big business, you have to understand the problem early empires faced. The 16th and 17th centuries were a global trade boom. Silver flooded from the Americas. Spices were hauled from Asia. And sugar, tobacco, and textiles crossed oceans in unimaginable volumes. The profits were massive. So were the risks. Voyages took months. Communication lagged by seasons. No state, no matter how powerful, had the resources to patrol every sea lane, escort every convoy, or defend every cargo ship. Empires were rich, but stretched thin. Navies were expensive. Wars were frequent. So, they arrived at a solution that felt pragmatic, efficient, and morally flexible. They privatized it. Governments began issuing documents known as letters of marque. These were official licenses that granted private ships the legal right to attack, capture, and plunder vessels of enemy nations. The violence was identical to piracy. The difference was authorization. With a letter, plunder became legal. Captured ships were brought to admiralty courts, where the cargo was declared legitimate prize. The proceeds were split between the crew.